Hey, happy St. Patrick's Day. We just had that a couple days ago. Sporting my Marine Corps green fleece. Love it. And Texas, it's actually kind of cool out here. So quite appropriate to wear it. Listen, tonight we're talking with Mark Shuster. He's a United States Marine Corps colonel. I went to TBS with his brother, which is such a small world. He was in 5th Platoon. I was in 1st Platoon. Um, very, very small world. But, he and I have been discussing stuff for a while. And one of the topics that we brought up is transition. Young Marine officers are not given an adequate briefing about life after the Corps and opportunities that they have. This is important. Nobody really gives you that. And honestly, when you go through TAPS, you are so brain dead after all this information that they give you. If they even mentioned it, it might have been so minuscule in your brain that you just forgot about it. So I'm going to bring Schuster on here. Shu, how are you?
Hey, Taco. What's going on, man?
Hey, I really appreciate you coming on here. And as I referred to earlier, two old Marines just sitting there spewing madness and telling lies, I guess. But
Yeah,
if
I bet we look like old Marines on the screen, too.
you know what, we are the old guys. I swear to God, 57 years old now. We would look at an old guy like us at the Hawk, or if he was a colonel or general, go,
Mhm.
dude, that guy is old.
Oh,
You know,
funny story. I was in Quantico. I think it was maybe last year. I was back there for headquarters Marine Corps business, and two of my staff NCOs had made warrant officer. And so I went down to the basic school to catch up with them and talk with them. And I walked into the Hawk. Well, the new Hawk. It's not the Hawk you and I and my brother knew.
right?
And I walked in, and I just felt like a dumb second lieutenant walking in. But I'll tell you what, the reception that I got was very cool. Nobody would look me in the eye. This room packed with staff NCOs and chief warrant officers, instructors. And I'm trying to figure out, why is it nobody wants to talk to me? Like, they were literally avoiding me. And then I realized I just walked in. I'm an old looking colonel. And
Yeah.
eventually, and I'm walking around and everybody's walking away from me. And finally, this CWO4 comes up to me and goes, "Hey, sir, can I help you? Because you look lost." And I go, "Well, I'm not really lost, but I'm looking for two of my Marines that are getting promoted to warrant officer." And eventually we located them. And so I'm up at the bar and I'm buying my Marines. I had a gunny who just made a warrant officer and a sergeant who made a warrant officer. I said, "Hey, let me get you a couple drinks." So I go up to the bar and I'm up there, and the same lady that was in the Hawk, the Asian girl from the 1980s, was still there. And I start talking to her, and she goes, "So when'd you come through TBS, Colonel?" And I'm like, "Oh, I came through here in '91." And this warrant officer next to me looks at me and goes, "Sir, did you say 91?" And he literally looks at me and goes, "How old are you, sir?" And I say, "Just walk away." It was hilarious. It was really, really fun. So, and I realized that, you walk into a room like that, you're the old guy. You're a whole different generation. Nobody wants to talk to you. So.
No, not at all. And so fearful, when you were a young lieutenant, to look at a colonel or to even talk to a colonel. You're
Scared
put
to
the brakes
death.
on. Scary.
Yeah, I never enjoyed going down to the regiment. For me, it was unique because I was a 3502. Most Marines today don't know what that is, but I was a motor transport officer when I got to 2nd Marine Division in March of '92. And I reported to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. Didn't know that there were motor T officers in the infantry. So when I called my brother, because I was supposed to go to truck platoon, and they reassigned me the division MTO, my brother thought it was the funniest thing he ever heard. And when I called him, he just like, "Good luck," hung up the phone. And so I checked in. And what was unique for me, though, was as a brand new 2nd lieutenant, I was on the battalion staff. So I really got a chance to learn how to interact with majors and lieutenant colonels as a brand new butterbar. But I never felt comfortable going up to regiment and dealing with the regimental commander. I was so afraid of colonels. They were just way beyond our capacity.
Well, it's one of our neighbor's kids is just sent me a letter from boot camp, right? So he's out at MCRD in San Diego. I had written him a letter on my cardstock, and of course it has the EGA, and it says Lieutenant Colonel Mitch Taco Bell, USMC, retired.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't see it through the letter, so the instructors didn't get a hold of him. But when he opened up the letter later and his buddies were standing there, they're like, "Holy shit, a lieutenant colonel is writing you," and he goes, trying to explain to him, "Yeah, this guy's like my second dad. I've known him since I was a kid." and for what you and I take for granted. But it is kind of funny. I mean, you think back, Cherry Point, standing at the Hawk in the bathroom, and
Hmm.
I pull up to the urinals. There's 3 urinals up there at the Hawk, not the Hawk, Dirty Shame was the bar, and I
Yeah.
pull up to the middle one. The base general comes up on my right side.
Well,
His chief of staff is on the left side, so I got a colonel and a general, and I'm standing in the middle, and I kinda peek over, and I'm like, "Oh god." And the chief of staff is
don't
up
miss.
against the resting parade rest against the wall, and the general's got his arm up there steadying himself, and he rips the biggest, wettest fart, and then he looks over and says across me, over me, he goes, "Hey Bob, it's your wife. Telephone. And boy, she's got bad breath."
Oh man.
And I just start laughing, and the chief of staff looks over and goes, "What's so funny, Lieutenant?"
I give you a
Never forget
bathroom
that.
story. I'm in my last few months with First Battalion, Second Marines because I've been tasked to go up to the regiment and take over the regimental motor pool. And I didn't know how to make those transition, and I wasn't making a lot of friends my last few months in the battalion. But we're out at a CAX, and for those of you that don't remember what a CAX is, they call them ITX in the last 2 decades. And my battalion commander at the time is now retired 3-star. I'm not going to use any names here to protect my innocence. And he's just, one of the best battalion commanders, I think, in the Marine Corps. And I didn't know it at the time. He had been in Vietnam with the Army. He was an award winner of the what's the award that they give to infantry officers? Now I'm really having a senior moment. Leftwich Trophy winner.
Yeah, Leftwich, yeah.
And so I just didn't realize it. But we're out at a CAX. We're doing great things. And back then in the 90s, when you went to Camp Wilson, right, they had these A-frame facilities, and the restrooms were these giant open areas, and they just had shitters lined up along the wall. I don't know if you ever made it out there. Well, you probably did as an aviator, but maybe not as a C-130 guy. And so I walk in, and I was heading back out to the field to take some trucks out. There's nobody in there. And come on. And that's a nice thing when you get to use the whole place to yourself.
Right.
Go in, you sit down. And there's some newspapers all over the floor, right? Because Marines like to, PM while you're doing your thing. And who walks in? The battalion commander.
Uh-huh.
What's he got to do? There's a whole wall full of shitters, and he has to sit down right next to me. We start having a chat, right? That's what Marines do. Awkward. Do you go first? Does he go? Who gets up first? I tell you, man, I was frozen with fear because it's just a situation you're not used to. And dealing with old colonels, and really, really difficult for those young lieutenants. And I didn't know what I was doing those first couple of years. So I was always fearful of 05s and 06s.
Well, so fast forward now, you're in 03. You're salty. You've been around. You've done your briefs, but it's time to get out. And in my example, when I got out in the S1, the young Lance Corporal goes, "Sir, would you like to resign your commission?" And I'm thinking,
what is that?
Give up my title of Captain of Marines? Like I'm giving up my commission. I was never an officer anymore. What? No, I don't want to give up my commission. Okay, so he writes no, and off I go on my merry way. What I didn't realize is that by Title 10, you have 20 years of commissioned service. That's it. So you have 20 years to retire, and period, unless you make, as a major. And then if you make lieutenant colonel, you have 28. And if you make colonel, you have
30.
30?
Yeah.
So you've got that time period. And then it wasn't until later I was a OIC for the Marine for Life. And I had this guy, he was down in San Antonio, and you're sitting there telling him, first of all, look, man, you got to volunteer to go to the war, because the commandant's come out and said, if you don't volunteer, this war's been going on for years. If you don't volunteer and go to the sandbox, you're not going to get promoted. And I think that was the edict at all the promotion boards. If you don't volunteer and serve overseas, you're not going to get promoted. So he didn't get promoted. And then all of a sudden he gets this letter at his 18. He has 18 sat years, but he has 20 years total time because he took 2 years off. And they go, you failed to complete your 20 years, you only have 18 sat years, you're out of the Marine Corps. And to be told that, don't pass go, don't collect $200, not to throw monopoly money around. That's not monopoly money.
No.
It's a career that you've put in and worked hard for, and all of a sudden to realize nobody told him that, nobody told me that. So we're jumping through the hoops trying to get his package up to the retention board and blah 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 blah. And at the time they were still kind of this is probably 2007, 2008 timeframe. So they were still, hey, you need a volunteer to go to the war. I think he had some issues from that. It was a learning curve for me as a leader that we need to better educate our young officers getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'll fall into that trap, right?
Yeah.
So so people know, we get 1 point a day, 365 points a year as an active duty service member.
7,200 points for 20 years.
Exactly. And as a reservist, you get 15 points for being associated with the reserves, and you just need 55 points to have a satisfactory year, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
55
Yep.
points?
Yep. So if you're a drilling reservist so there's three areas you can be in the reserves. There's the individual ready reserve, which essentially is you still have an obligation to the Marine Corps, either through PLC, ROTC, or an academy, but you're not actively drilling. So your name is in a drawer, and it used to be managed by MOBCOM, Mobilization Command, out of Kansas City, and now it's McCursa, which is out of New Orleans. And actually, right. Colonel Trey Cherishell, who's a phenomenal Marine officer, is currently in charge of that, even though he's coming over to MLG with me to be the three. And so if you're not in the IRR and you want to participate as a drilling reservist, then you have two options. You can join the SMCR, Selected Marine Corps Reserve, which is a unit-based organization. So like if you're in a flying reserve squadron, that's be an SMCR. I'm currently an SMCR Marine as the Command Inspector General for 4th MLG. So we train and deploy as units. As an SMCR Marine, if you earn 50 points per anniversary year, not fiscal year, then you achieve a satisfactory year. And like you said, while you're participating on a regular basis throughout the year, at the end of your anniversary year and they total up your points, 15 of them are participation points that they give you. So you really only need to get 35 more points. But Marines are participating. Usually today, we're earning anywhere from 50 to 100 points per year. The third option is the IMA, Individual Mobilization Augmentees. And these are individual reserve Marines, enlisted, warrant officers, and commissioned officers that kind of get assigned to units and they fill in the gaps. They don't deploy as units. And it's a little less stressful on your schedule. So if you have a really strenuous civilian career, then you can drill off cycle and you can drill more of an individual basis. The point structure is the same, 50 points a year, 15 to participate. The other thing that comes along with that, Taco, I'll mention is if you're an SMCR Marine or an IMA Marine, while you're participating, you're also eligible for TRICARE Reserve Select. So a single Marine can cover his entire medical insurance for $48 a month. And a family of like me and my wife, we're on it right now. I pay I think it's $239 a month, and I could have 50 children and it's all covered. So that's a significant benefit, not to mention you also are getting paid. You have lots of opportunities to deploy. And if you want to go on active duty, it's much easier to mobilize from the SMCR or the IMA if you want to do that. So that's kind of how that works. And you're right. It's all based on points to earn those years.
But, going back to the medical portion of it, my airline has a great medical plan.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I thought, well, why should I do TRICARE when I activated to go to Iraq? Why should I do TRICARE? I've got medical through my company. Well, I went with it, and it turns out, when you have kids, of course, kids get sick or break an arm or do whatever or need an operation or something. You've got to pay so much out of pocket before you meet your deductible. Well, when you have TRICARE as a secondary, they pick up everything. So there's no out of pocket for you. It's perfect if you've got a family and your company offers a medical plan, use that as a primary, TRICARE as a secondary, it picks up everything out of pocket. We had operations on our kids' knees. All our kids' knees were warped, and they had to go in there and put these little metal braces for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff was out of pocket, never paid a dime. It was awesome. And that's just something to think about as well. So SMCR IMA, you can do that if it's a paid drilling job. Now, the benefits of an IMA guy, like I did IMA with the Reserve Support Officer Program through MCRIC, through the Marine Corps Recruiting Command. And as a RSO in 2004, I got back up with Recruiting Station Fort Worth because I'd gotten off recruiting duty. So I figured when I get back on, I was doing coloring books for points and NAVMAC 799s. You know what those are?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take that back one step. So golly, man, there's so much to cover in this, and I'm hoping I'm doing it right. When you get out, we'll use me as an example. I signed my DD 214 September 15th of 1998. So I had all those points up to September. And so that meant I was good. Now my anniversary date was somehow October.
It should have been close to if you don't ever get out, it should have been your date of original entry, which can also be your pay entry base date, which would be your commission date. And keep telling your story, and then I'll tell everybody what happened to me because I've got a long gap.
So maybe it was.
Would have been June of '88, right? June of '88 is when you and my brother got commissioned, right?
May 25th.
Okay. You were May, he was
we
June.
Commissioned. We were PLC. We got commissioned. I got commissioned May 8th, but we fell into the Naval Academy deal. So all of our commissions were when they commissioned, and that was the 25th.
Yeah, and then Scott and I were both UCLA ROTC graduates. He got commissioned in June of '88 and then went right to TBS. I was June of '91 and went to TBS. But go back to what you were talking about, your transition story.
Yeah, so when I transitioned and I got out, you had enough time that you were good for the rest of the year. So you had a sat year that year.
Right.
Now you go into the following year, you need to do something to get points. Well, I found out that you could do this NAVMAC 799 where you were given points through associate duty with the unit, but you didn't get paid.
Appropriate duty is what they call it today.
Appropriate duty. So I would fill out this NAVMAC 799. One drill point was 4 hours. So I did 8 hours. I got 2 points.
Correct.
And I would give it to the CO. The CO would sign it. I would fax it over to New Orleans.
That's funny.
And then it would get added to my my record, accredited points and stuff. So that worked, but you weren't getting paid for that, nor did you get the medical. But it kept you alive within the system. And so then from there, I went to in 04, 03, got back in with the reserves, or not reserves. Got back in IMA with Recruiting Station Fort Worth as a reserve support officer. Now, in the meantime, you get promoted in the reserves. So I went from captain when I got out, senior captain, and I picked up major that first year in the reserves. So now I'm a major. I'm working with the RSCO, who's a major, and I'm going to do all the stuff that is a time suck for him. Right. Like I'd go attend local meetings and different organizations that he would love to attend. He just didn't have time. So I did that, but I got paid for that, and I had the medical. But then when you volunteer, one thing that you got to realize as a reservist, you have the opportunity to pick jobs anywhere. I mean, it's really wild. So if I wasn't associated to that unit, and let's just say I want to associate with the unit out in Hawaii, and they do all of the planning for the operations in Thailand and Australia or Korea, I could go out there on a staff for 6 weeks, get paid to be in Hawaii for 6 weeks, and have an entire sat year done in the summertime. Yes. While you're on vacation out in Hawaii, or going over to Norway for whatever Battle X that is, or you can go be a staff puke they can fit you in as an officer anywhere in all these billets. So there's an abundance of stuff that somebody's not telling you. Shoo, you're going to go be the FAC for these guys, or you're going to be this. Oh God, that's not what I want to do. Not career enhancing, not anything. I don't want to do that, but you get stuck with it. In this case, like when I volunteered to go to Iraq, I remember the officer at Quantico sending me a list of all the billets, and I'm going, ooh, battle captain, assistant battle captain. Ooh, that sounds cool. I'll put that on my short list, right? What's a battle captain do? And the guy's like, I got no clue. Well, that sounds cool. How about air boss? I know what an air boss does on an aircraft carrier. What does the air boss do in the middle of the desert? He goes, I don't know. I guess he bosses airplanes around. Well, that's on my short list too. Then, you can go through and you can look at all these jobs and then kind of pick and choose your job. And that's what's brilliant as a reservist. You're sort of a free agent, like an NFL guy, and you can pick and choose whatever you want. But that if you get out and you don't do anything and you didn't reserve, now take that back one more. If you resign your commission, your clock stops. That 20-year clock of commission time stops. So we had guys that resigned their commission. They got back in as captains. And then, they were older. And then they got back in as captains. They ended up retiring as lieutenant colonels. But their clock stopped. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'll talk my story and for everybody out there, and Taco, I really appreciate being here. I've seen your shows, and I am way on the low part of the totem pole as experiences. But what happened with me is, it's interesting because nobody told the LA Dodgers that I was supposed to be their shortstop, and they completely avoided me in baseball. So a movie that most people haven't heard of came out in 1986 called Top Gun. Maybe you've heard of it. And my brother was always going to be a Marine infantry officer from the time he was just a little lad, so to speak. But not me. I was going to be an athlete. I was a baseball player, and anything with a ball I could do well as a young guy. But I went and saw Top Gun with him, and when I saw those fighter jets flying around, I was like, "What are those? And can I do that?" And my brother looked at me and said, "Yeah, you can do that, but you need to do it in the Marine Corps, not in the Navy, because they've got a brand new fighter jet called the F-18." I was like, "Holy crap!" So I ran home. I took down all my posters for baseball, and I put up all these Marine F-18 posters, and I got focused on looking at joining the Marine Corps. And I joke when I get a chance to talk to people about transition and my experiences, I say I'm a failure in life 3 times. Wasn't going to get married, wasn't going to have kids, wasn't going to join the military. It's like fail, fail, fail. And flash forward, my experience in the Marine Corps totally different from my brother's. I wanted to be an aviator. And then when I started learning what the challenges were to become an aviator, and I have tremendous respect to you as a Marine aviator and all of the schooling and education, my head wasn't right in high school, and I didn't prepare for school. So aviation didn't work out. And my brother told me one day, he says, "Look, if you want to become an aviator through TBS, you can, but understand, you're never going to really lead Marines until you're a lieutenant colonel, because you're focusing on flying." Okay. So figure out what you want to do. So I decided to become a ground officer, and I came out of the basic school, either as a logistics or artillery officer. Those were my 2 primaries. And I wound up with Motor T. Great. I'm very thankful because I had an incredible time as a Motor T officer. And after my first tour with the grunts and the regiment and all that, and I think I was stationed at Camp Lejeune for 35 months from 92 to 95, and I was deployed like 34 months. It was fantastic.
Good time.
Yep. So I went off on recruiting duty, and I got sent up to RS Springfield in Springfield, Massachusetts, or Chicopee was the station. You've probably flown through. Was it Air Dobbins up there?
Yeah, Dobbins.
Yeah. And so while I'm on recruiting duty, this is 95 to 97. There's not a lot going on in the world. The Marine Corps was struggling with, you got issued toilet paper, you got issued a pen. You remember those days, very austere. And there's 8 recruiting stations in the 1st District. And on July 1st, 1997, 7 of the XOs all resigned. Now, I didn't know what resignation meant. There was no transition assistance. My commanding officer, who's a retired colonel, and tremendous respect for him, he was an artillery officer. He tried to talk me into staying in the Marine Corps, but we never really had a conversation about the reserves. So 1 July 97, me, my wife at the time, a 6-week-old baby boy, we go driving out of Massachusetts. I stopped off in Connecticut and promoted one of my meritorious staff sergeants, and off I went. Didn't know what I was doing. And I decided to start a business, a self-employment business out at Camp Pendleton area. The problem, Taco, was with no understanding of what it means to leave the Marine Corps and nobody guiding you towards the idea that one day you're this hard charging, ass kicking captain. I had 3 years time and grade. It's a real challenge to take off the rank and learn how to be just you. You know what I'm talking about? And for those officers and young Marines that are watching this right now, it's really difficult to learn how to do that. So the next 2 years were extremely hard for me. I was struggling in my marriage. I was struggling in my identity. I was going through a depression and a dark phase. I was a financial advisor, financial planner. I sold drugs out of my car in Los Angeles, legal drugs for Pfizer. I did that for 18 months. I was really having a hard time finding my place, brand new father. And at one point I decided to figure out about maybe going back in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, I'm a reserve. I don't know what that means. So somehow I found a unit at Camp Pendleton called 1 MACE, which was a reserve organization, the MEF Augmentation Command Element. It was commanded by a 1-star reserve general. I didn't even know they had reserve generals. So I drove down there and I went inside, I saw the major who was the INI. And he's like, yeah, come on back in, man. We just, our G4 just resigned and we're looking for Marines to join the AR program. Well, what's AR? Used to be the old FTS program or the 139ers, right? 159ers. If you did more than 159 days, then benefits transitioned. So, all right. So I closed down my business, which was failing miserably. And I put the uniform back on and I start going in and I'm drilling. Next thing I know, he puts me on orders. So I'm now the G4 for 1 MACE, which was in support to 1 MEF. And he convinces me to apply for the active reserve program. I put in for it, I get selected, and the monitor says, we're not going to keep you at Camp Pendleton. We're going to move you all the way to Camp Lejeune. And I was like, I've been here 9 months. I applied for this job. No. So I left the Marine Corps. Very angry, very bitter. And then that's when I actually resigned my commission. Because when I was on recruiting duty, they just transferred me to the IRR because I still had an obligation.
Right.
So I resigned my commission and I actually have 2 different discharges, right? But my final discharge was December of 1999. Taco, that's when I joined the Civ Div. 100%. I was out of the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I didn't look back. So.
But did you have any, you didn't have any unsat years between leaving recruiting duty and the MACE?
Well, it's interesting. As it turns out, I did. And you bring up a good point. I had gone back to the reserves. I left in 97, 98, I went back in. And by the way, there was no MOL. Nobody showed me a career retirement credit report, an annual. I didn't know anything about points. Nobody told you about that. You just didn't talk about it. You're just like, you're in the reserves, come to work. All right. Because they mobilized me.
Right.
And put me on orders. So I'm out of the Marine Corps in 1999. And that's when I went off and I got involved in the Marine Corps League and the VFW and the DAV, did all my part to serve while you're not serving. And I was in real estate at the time. And I sold a house to an instructor out at Point Hueneme. I remember standing in his office and he's like, hey, Shu, you should come back in the Marine Corps. And I looked at him and laughed. I was like, really? Look at me. I'm a fat 37-year-old former captain of Marines. That's ridiculous. And how would I get back in? And he says, well, here's a card for a PSR. And I didn't know what a PSR, prior service recruiter.
Prior service recruiter, yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was really having problems at home. Life wasn't good. So I go home and like any good Marine, I'm a total idiot. What do? I call the PSR. I call him the next day and he goes, hey, sure, what's going on? I'm like, well, what does this all mean? How does this work? I would know I was on recruiting duty, but I don't know what this does. And, I might be a quota for you. So he gets excited. He says, sir, give me your social. I'll call you back in a couple of days. I was back in a couple of days and he says, you're good to go. And I said, well, what does that mean, Staff Sergeant? He goes, well, sir, here's what happens. You had, 8 or 9 years of qualifying service. So Headquarters Marine Corps knows that you're 37 years old. And what they do is they take your service years, they subtract that from your age, and they calculate what's called a relative age to make sure you still have enough opportunity to earn 20 years of satisfactory time. He goes, sir, you're good. All we're waiting on is for you to get sworn in. Please go find an active reserve or honorably retired Marine captain or higher and have him or her give you the oath of office, fax me the paperwork. You're back in the Marine Corps. And I was like, what? Do I have to go back to the basic school? Am I a
Yeah,
second lieutenant?
that's important. Yeah.
He goes, no, sir, you'll go back in as a captain. It's called a reappointment of your commission. Holy crap. So this is November of 2004. On January 8th, 2005, at my local VFW, a guy you may have heard of, an incredible mentor of mine and somebody who's given me great opportunities in life, a guy named Captain Dale Dye.
Oh, yeah.
He gave me the oath of office down at my local VFW and put me back in the Marine Corps. And it was funny because I had gotten all my chocolate chip uniforms and I was polishing my black boots to go back in. And this is 2005, right? I had to go get Marpats and like, boots you don't shine? What are you talking about? Uniforms you don't have to press? Wow. I should have stayed in the Marine Corps just for that. So what happens is, so now I'm back in the Marine Corps Reserve, but I don't have a unit. And what had happened was I got accepted to a program called Peacetime Wartime Support. And another mentor of mine now, who's a retired Marine colonel, and he did 36 years with LAPD. He brought me back in the Marine Corps, and I worked for him. And I was basically, if Weapons Company 223 out of Port Hueneme mobilized, I would be activated as the RBE commander. Great. Sounds good. But let's talk about the specifics of my commission. I came back in on January 5th, 2008, not knowing anything about Title 10 regulations, which state when a Marine officer is reappointed, they must have at least a year of observation time before they're eligible for promotion. Well, little did I know that every year, you may remember this, Taco, the Reserve Promotion Board for majors and lieutenant colonels happens the third week of January every year.
Right.
I had just snuck in. So January of 2005, I'm a captain with 4.5 years time in grade. January of 2006, I'm in zone. I'm at the top of the zone. So I get selected to major the next year. But here's what happens to me legally in the Marine Corps. My pay entry base date got adjusted from 15 June 91 to February of 97 to account for that 6-year gap. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But my date of original entry to this day is still 15 June 1991. So that's never changed. So that's how they adjust it. They reappoint your commission. I went back into the reserves, but I went into I think that was an IMA billet. And then they adjust your pay. They adjust your pay and your base date to account for those 6 years. So now I'm back in the roles, and I haven't stopped since January of 2005. And the silliness that you see behind me was all a result of that, because my boss went down to SOI and he took over the reserve battalion. I went and joined him. And in the 5 years I was there, I was mobilized twice and spent almost 40 months on active duty, 32 of them as a battalion commander. And that's what's unique, that when you talked about where you can fill in, I wound up on staff as a battalion commander, as a major at School of Infantry West. And I was part of the active duty staff, and I was leading our small reserve battalion, and we were doing incredible things. Like we mobilized 2,500 IRRs. And then after coming back from Australia, I wound up spending 32 months as a CO, and we were training combat hunter across 3 infantry divisions, trained thousands of Marines, traveled the entire world doing that. And that's the type of stuff that you get to do as a reserve officer that you never see coming in the active duty, because it's very regimented, right? Active duty, you know what you do: TBS, fleet, school, B billet, fleet, school, billet, fleet, school, and then you retire. So that's kind of my silly story. And then from there, it's just kind of ballooned on, and I just kept going in the reserves, and they just kept lowering the bar for promotions, and I kept sneaking under there. And here I am, a colonel about ready to retire. It makes no sense to me at all.
And what are you doing right now?
So right now in the Marine Corps Reserve, so I'm the Command Inspector General for 4th Marine Logistics Group. We're headquartered in New Orleans. I work directly for Major General Souza, who's the MLG commander. And I've been doing that a little over 2 years. And I'm basically a squad leader. I have another colonel that works on my team. I've got a major who's my OIC. I've got a master gunny as my senior enlisted advisor. And then we have a small cadre of subject matter experts, staff NCOs. We travel on the MLG, and we conduct CGIs and assist visits that are designed to help commanders at all levels, regimental, battalion, and then the company and detachments, make sure that they're operating and taking care of Marines in accordance with the Headquarters Marine Corps IG checklist. And for me, I get to walk in as the old guy and impart a bunch of wisdom and knowledge. And Marines look at me like, who is this old guy and when's he leaving? And
Yeah.
it's been a really great opportunity, Taco, to travel around the Marine Corps Reserve, because MFR has 100 and what is it? I think Lieutenant General Bellin has 156 individual sites across the U.S., Hawaii, Guam, Okinawa. The MLG, we have 53 sites, and I've got to get to every single site once every 3 years. And it's interesting because I've been mobilized 3 times. SOI, I worked at MCI West on 2 different separate tours. MLG, it's my second tour with MLG. Twice I was looking to mobilize, once to Afghanistan, once to Iraq. And each time I was given opportunities, and my commander's like, hey, we need you to take charge. You're going to stay right here. You're going to do this. You'll deploy later. And so I wound up spending most of my time, here in CONUS, and unfortunate to those situations. But hey, as a young lieutenant, 92 to 95, I hit the Middle East and Somalia and Haiti and Norway and Japan and all types of pretty cool things that I didn't think I would do. But I've certainly done things in the reserves that I never thought I would do, because I really I went in on a whim. I didn't even tell my former wife. And that was bad. If you're listening to this, make sure you do decisions with your spouse. It was a bad time for me. But the Marine Corps Reserve oftentimes is the best thing that Marines have going for them. Do you know what FPC is? Did you guys use the Force Preservation Council your last few years in the Marine Corps? So the Marine Corps has created what's called Force Preservation Council, and it's a really good program that's designed both for our active component Marines and our reserve Marines, where commanders conduct FPCs at the company, detachment level, battalion, and regimental level. And what it is if you have a young Marine that's struggling, you can assign them to the Force Preservation Council. They get assigned a direct mentor, and it can be any pay grade. I could be on it, right? And it's a series of questions that you use to screen with your Marines and sailors, because we'll wrap our sailors into it. And you sit down and you're like, hey, Lieutenant Colonel Taco, I'm going to be your mentor because I'm old and I outrank you technically, but I'm still a boot to you, as my brother reminds me, right? I'm still a boot to you. And you can be in low, medium, and high. And with that Force Preservation Council, it allows us to really look into a Marine's life and support them. When I was the XO of CLR 45 in Marietta, our deputy commander, who's a mentor of mine, Colonel Peterson, when we would present the Force Preservation Council every Joe weekend, we would talk about these Marines that were in the high list, and they're very high profile, and only a commander can pull them off a high. And a lot of times we would talk to the Marines that were struggling. They're having marital problems. They're having job problems. They're having insurance problems, all types of things. He'd remind them that, hey, school's not going well. Your job's not going well. Your family's not going well. The one thing that can be stable in your life is the Marine Corps. Why don't we put you on orders and stabilize your life? Take care of your money problems, your health problems, your insurance problems. Just for a year, you're a lance corporal or corporal. We can afford you. Let's do that. And so the messaging I got from him was the Marine Corps, oftentimes for our reserve component Marines that are balancing civilian life and the Marine Corps, sometimes the Marine Corps is the best thing you have going for yourself.
That's awesome. I never heard of that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool approach. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of my story and what happens when Marines want to reappoint. So what I would tell people as we're here and talking smack, right, is what should a young captain who gets out of the Marine Corps active component, right? They got their college done. They've got their TBS, their MOS school. They've had their first tour in the Marine Corps. Maybe they're in a B billet and they're deciding, wow, do I really want to go back to the fleet, get a company, or go back to a flying squadron? I've got a new family and I've got these people like Mark Shuster and Taco Bell trying to drag me into industry. What do I do? Do I get out and throw away 8 or 10 years of the Marine Corps? Or how do I manage both sets? And what do I do in the reserves? What should we be telling these young officers and even staff NCOs that face the same problem?
Yeah. Senior staff NCOs.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would say they've got to find a reserve mentor, somebody that's been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. Because if I didn't have this guy, Bill McReynolds, who is with 24th Marines as a fact for them in Kansas City, if I didn't have Bill directing me and telling me, hey, you need to do this, X, Y, Z, I would have been clueless. So they've got to seek out and find a reservist who's able to help them mentor just a little bit, just to push them in the right direction. Because if nobody told me about the Title 10 and the time, I could have gotten screwed later on if
Mhm.
I had, say, 2 or 3 unsat years. So what I would tell a young Marine getting out is you've got to find a reserve unit, or you need to figure out how to navigate the NavMax 799s, which you can Google and pull the form up. Go in and attach yourself with some unit, and you could be like for the ball, for example. Um, I did a bunch of stuff, work for the squadron for the ball,
Right.
and all I did was fill out NavMax 799s. I didn't get paid, but my time, I could go in on my days off and I'd go work, and I would fill up enough that I would have a sat year. So I would tell them, if figure out what you're going to do. If you're in the IRR, you get 15 points for just being associated.
No,
You
not in the
can,
IRR, but the McCram, I think I checked it a few weeks ago, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
yeah, no.
I think in the IRR, you only need 27 points per year for a sat year. So they change it in the IRR because you're not actively drilling.
Oh,
So
really? Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, and I was looking at the McCram yesterday to try to track that. I believe I read that a couple years ago, but nobody in the SMCR worries about the IRR. So
Yeah.
that's something we want to tell our Marines. Read the McCram, which is the Marine Corps Reserve Administrative Manual. It's the Bible for us. Hold on a second. Apparently, I have an interview with you. It just popped up on reminder. So less points in the IRR, but you make a good point. Those appropriate duty points. And when I finished, so I did command and staff while I was on active duty at SOI. But I did the Air War College, my TLS, I did non-resident
Mhm.
when I decided not to retire as an 05. And I got 86 points for graduating the War College. So
Yeah.
there's PME as well.
Well, there is PME. I called it coloring books. What I was involved with a group
Funny.
of pilots, and we literally had the scam going. We had, hey, here's the list. Here's the Army. Here's the Navy.
Mm.
You would do enlisted PME, and you would get 2 points for some course that took you an hour and a half.
You weren't scamming. You were getting smarter.
I was getting more intelligent on my
Right.
PME, that's for sure.
Math for
So
Marines is good for 05s and 06s.
it you could do all this stuff and you could get all the satisfactory points to make a year, but you can't retire out of that. It's just kind of a placeholder until you get back into an SMCR drilling unit or an IMA unit, or you choose to go active duty or do some stuff. But there truly are a lot of available billets around the world in different staff positions that
Yeah.
somebody could do. Now, you talked about make sure you coordinate with your spouse.
Yes.
All right. I'm I'm out in I took the CEO's place and I went and took a bunch of educators out to San Diego for the
Mhm.
big educator visit.
Oh, for the recruiting stations?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
RS Fort Worth.
Yeah. I
And
did that twice. Cool.
I met this fellow major who was out at headquarters Marine Corps, and he happened to be out there for his nephew's graduation. And we're talking. I go, "What do you do?" And he says, "Oh, I coordinate all the reserve billets to active duty. Fill in the
Oh,
spots for all these billets that we have."
yeah.
Like, really? Like what? Like, well, what do you want? I go, well, what if I want to go to Iraq? He goes, "Oh yeah, I got a shit ton of billets. I can send you a list of stuff, and you can go through it and tell me what you want, and blah 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 blah." Well, I told my wife that when I got back on, of course, 9/11 was hot and heavy, and in the press every day was how many people died, and they made
Mhm.
sure that everybody was against the war. Okay, fine. Um, so as a young mother with a young child, the idea of me going back on, if I let you get back into recruiting duty in this reserve gig, are you going to get deployed? And I go, no, which is true.
Mhm.
But I could volunteer for it. And then what I didn't tell my wife was that I had volunteered to go to Iraq. And then all of a sudden, hey, I got involuntarily recalled. And I even told the guy that in the email. I said, you make sure that it says involuntarily recalled
Yes.
okay, because my wife's going to kill me. Well, I happened to get up from my desk and go to the bathroom, and there was an email to this guy, and it said, "Hey, jackass, I'm volunteering for this crap. So, no, I don't want that Tampa billet. If I go to war, I want to go to Iraq and be with Marines. I don't want that purple hat crap in Baghdad with the Army. I want to be with Marines in Iraq."
Mm-hmm.
Well, she read that. She came into the office to get some stamps, and she read that thing, and it was a big come to Jesus meeting with my young bride, who wasn't a military wife at all. We'd gotten married after I had been out, so she just knew me as an airline guy. Um, that was a hard come to Jesus. But once we got over that, I went over there and survived Iraq. When I come around the house, I'm flying for the reserves, and I'm like, you know, Afghanistan is done. It's kind of a quiet war. I'd love to go to Afghanistan, check that out. Okay, fine, go. Really? Yeah. Go find a billet over in Afghanistan now and leave the squadron, go to Afghanistan for 8 months, which turned out to be an awesome tour.
Yeah, it's the
A lot
family.
of stuff.
The family piece is really important, Taco, and I appreciate you sharing that. My ex-wife at the time, when we started dating in college, and she was all in, incredible mom, incredible wife, and she would have stayed in the Marine Corps for 50 years. We're doing well. After the divorce, I had already been in the Marine Corps and all that. I'd gone back in. My current wife, Mary, I don't think you've met Mary yet, but you will. As you know, she's 23 years with United. So I understand kind of the airline world and didn't understand in the beginning. And she's always been supportive. She's the one that told me when I was getting ready to retire as an 05, she said, look, you need to try for 06 because you're always going to wonder. And we can do this. And she said, I support you 100%. And she knew I'd have to leave Camp Pendleton, and we moved to Colorado Springs, and I'd be going back to a major SMCR unit at the regimental or higher level. It's very, very supportive. When Katrina, it's not Katrina, I apologize. When COVID broke out in 19 and 20, CGMFR established a task force down in New Orleans. And my current CG, at the time, he was a 1-star, now Major General Souza, was assigned as kind of a task force commander. And I got told I was going to be his 4. And so I had to come home and basically get with Mary. It's really the first time that we were looking at a forced join for something. It was probably going to be a year in New Orleans. Now, look, a year in New Orleans is nothing like going overseas. I get that. But it rips you away from what you're doing in your life and your career and all that. And it was a tough conversation, but she said, no, 100% in. I get it. Incredibly supportive, and says, go do what you need to do. And I will tell you that if you are, for those Marine officers, our staff NCOs, because usually around staff sergeant or gunny, maybe they're looking about staying in or getting out. But those captains and majors that are looking to leave active duty and come to the reserve side, it's really important that you and SyncPAC's spouse, because I don't know who's a spouse and who's not, but you've got to work together, co-CEOs of your family business, and your civilian careers and your military career. It's a huge piece. Yes, healthcare benefits, phenomenal. The extra money that you can make on a particular year, whether you just drill or activate, it's a real benefit. The fact that you're working towards your pension, a government pension, is huge, right? Those pensions can be worth millions of dollars from age 60 through age 80. But if you don't have support from your spouse, you can't do this job. You just can't. And sometimes it's not going to fit into your future. So I want our Marines to know there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving the Marine Corps. It's a perfectly acceptable decision to say, I served in the Marine Corps, I served my country, I took care of Marines and sailors, and I'm going to leave and be an honorably discharged Marine. That's what the majority of Marines do. And that is a perfectly acceptable decision. It's also acceptable to say, hey, I'm going to figure out what this life is like. The good news is if you're no longer an obligated Marine, and for the officers, if you no longer have an obligation to a commissioning program, you can join the reserves, get into a unit, and if it doesn't work, you drop. You can drop
you leave.
to the IR, you can drop to the IR, or you can drop out of the Marine Corps, and that's okay. Perfectly acceptable as well. What I'd encourage the Marines to do, and I think, Taco, you and I, we're always going to be the ones at this point now where, like, you got to drink the Kool-Aid. Come on, everybody drink the Kool-Aid. You got to get into the environment and you got to be the rah-rah Marine. But the important thing is you've also at this point now, if you're looking at a career both in the civilian side like you and I do, plus you want to manage the reserve side, which you did very, very well. And somehow I figured it out. I don't know how I did, is it doesn't have to be a commitment. You don't have to say, well, I've got to stay for 20 to get the retirement. That just has to be a goal. And if that's something that you want, it's possible. And here's how it works is in the reserves today, Taco. We have something called the career management team. So active duty officers, if you and I were in our active duty, or like what my brother went through, right? 20 years of active duty, 88 to 2008. Every 3 years came up, who told him where he was going? The monitor.
Monitor, right.
He talked to the monitor, and the monitor said, hey, Lieutenant Shuster, Captain Shuster, Major Shuster, Colonel Shuster, this is where you're going. And Scott was always like, okay, thanks very much. Boom, hang up the phone. He went and did his job. What do you do in the reserves? And here's what's a cool part of this conversation. Life in the Marine Corps Reserve as an officer is just like a professional civilian world. Your number one tool to help you find where you want to go, Taco, and be successful is your network. So what the Marine Corps created a few years ago, and a few is a relative term, it might be 10 or 15. They now have what's called a career management team. It's commanded by an 06 colonel, and and that colonel has a team of career management officers. They're usually all 06 colonels. They're all reserves. And this is an IMA post. And what this post does is they assign a series of MOSs to each colonel. And so as a logistics officer, a former 0402, now an 8040, because I'm an old guy, you had a career management team member, and it was an 06 colonel. And what they do is you can contact the CMT and say, hey, Colonel Bell, this is Captain Shuster. I'm thinking about starting this career in the reserves. Sir, I don't know anything about what I'm doing. What should I do? And those colonels will guide you and focus you on what you need to do. Things such as everything you do to get promoted active duty, you do the same things on the reserve. It's the exact same requirements. Everything that you do to be successful and get promoted on active duty, it's identical to the reserves. What we want to do for you, Captain Shuster, is we want to find a place that fits your requirements. So you're an 0402, you live in Colorado Springs. Well, guess what? Headquarters Battalion 453 is 45 minutes up the road at Buckley Space Force Base. They're looking for a captain to come in and be the Battalion S4. You want the job? Go for it. Oh, by the way, there's also Q Battery 514. Now, you're not an artillery officer, but they need a battery commander. You want to become an artillery officer? We'll send you to school. We'll change your MOS. They can do that in the reserves. You can't do that in active duty generally.
Yeah.
Right? So you have all these areas you can go with. So today, what you want to do is we want to get you in touch with the CMT and get a colonel who's been doing this like me for 27 years and say, hey, Captain Bell, what can I do to make you successful in the reserves? And what you want to learn about in the reserves is a retired two-star told me this many years ago. She was really wise. She said, Mark, just blossom in place. We don't care what you do in a career that involves reserve duty, just blossom in place. Because many times you're not going to be in your primary MOS. You're going to be in a different MOS. Like I could have wound up working for you. You could have been a reserve squadron commander, and I could have come in and been your squadron S4. I could have been your squadron S3 because you just said, hey, I like your background. I like your reputation. Why don't you come over to me? You're not going to be flying, but you're going to help me lead the unit. So I know I'm going off in many directions, but
no. That's actually networking is
number one, because you're going to get your jobs in the reserves through your network. And here's how I got my job that helped me make it to colonel. I was at MCI West. My boss was a colonel, and I told him, hey, sir, I'm not retiring. I want to continue to serve and compete for one more promotion. He goes, that's great. Where do you want to go? I go, sir, I got to go back to the SMCR, but I'm a pretty senior lieutenant colonel. Where do I go? He goes, well, it just so happens I sit next to the brand new deputy commander for CLR 45. You want to go to a regiment? I was like, yeah, I'll go to a regiment. He goes, well, I'll send him your RQS. So that network led to 3 weeks later, I get a call from Colonel John Peterson, and he's like, this is what we need. We got Marines that are deploying. We need an XO. And he put me through the whole interview process. And eventually, about a month later, the regimental commander called me, who was a mobilized reserve. He was taking the regiment. He was the deputy commander and was mobilized. He goes, Mark, you got 24 hours. I think you'd be a great candidate. Call me back within 24 hours. The job is yours, and let's get started. and I did it. And
And for
interesting
those
fact,
that don't know, RQS is Reserve Qualification Summary. It's your
qualification
basic
summary.
military resume.
Sorry. Yes, it's your military resume. And what happened was I spent 2.5 years as a regimental XO out in Marietta, Georgia. Very difficult job, but incredibly rewarding.
And this was active duty time?
No, this is an SMCR job.
Oh.
But I will tell you, I spent a lot of extra time on active duty because when you're the XO of a regiment, there were periods where I do 3 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 4 weeks there, did a major exercise, as an LCE command group. And look, it was April of 20. I was on my way to Greece for my civilian job, and I just landed in Newark. I'm sure you've landed there many times, right? And I got a call from the commanding general, and he's like, Mark, I just got the P4 list, and unfortunately, I want you to know you didn't get selected for colonel. And I said, hey, sir, I really appreciate the phone call. Okay, I understand, sir. And as long as you're not firing me as a regimental XO, in 6 months, I can submit another package. And it was the only time I've been passed over. But I think the timing was right. I needed to get more experience in the SMCR, and I had a great conversation with the CG, and he supported me. And that was April of 20. December of 20, he called me, and the new list came out, and I made it. And it was shocking that I made it. But the issue that happens is, and this ties back to the network, now I had to find a new job as an 06. And that's one of the most difficult things to do in the Marine Corps, because there's very limited places to go as an 06 reserve. And
usually you have to go over to Kuwait or some joint billet somewhere and
correct.
give a year of your life on a staff someplace.
Yep. And those were the billets that were coming up to me. And what happened was I got a call from MLG, and they're like, hey, we've got a spot. The previous XO, who's now my boss in the Marine Corps, he's the deputy commander, a guy named Colonel Eric Burgel, who, I'll make a prediction here. Next year, he'll probably be a general. A great guy. Is my boss today with the CG. And he brought me up to the MLG, and I find my way into operational logistics cell up there. And then a year later, the CG calls and says, hey, I want you to be the command inspector general. I want you to join the team. So I joined that team. And then a month later, I'm the CGI. And so the story there is, it's all about the network. Mm-hmm. From the moment I came back into Marine Corps, the only way I found jobs was through my network. And that's the thing I want the young Marines to know, that if they're considering coming over and joining the reserves and getting into that component, you hit the nail on the head. You need to have a mentor. So I have had, in fact, my boss, he's in a picture, either this one or this one back here. When I was at SOI, his son just recently left active duty a year ago. And Brennan called me up. He's like, hey, can you talk to my son about the reserves? Of course I'll do. I'll talk to anybody about the reserves. And all I can do is give you my story, right? I don't want to lecture you. Nobody responds to lectures, right, Taco? But they'll respond to stories. And I'm more than happy to share my silly story about what's happened to me, because I think it'll connect with others, because that's what helped me make it through the reserves. So network is most important. The career management team for our officers are really important. For the staff NCOs, find another senior staff NCO that has taken the journey, or an officer, and let's help you figure out what your path is going to be, because it's a great experience. I would tell everybody that when you leave active duty, stay in the Marine Corps, stay connected with the Marine Corps. You will miss the Marines. You will miss the sailors. You will miss the opportunities you have. Why do people go back after 6 years? When I got to MCI West, one of the colonels that I worked with, dude, he had a 10-year gap. And yeah. I mean, he was flying, when he was in the Marine Corps, he was flying A6s. And then before he left, he wound up transitioning to Harriers. He got out of the Marine Corps for 10 years. He's a captain with Delta. And he had an incredible tour as a colonel, but he didn't think he could
what's his name? Is it
Tim? It's Tim Bladisell. You know Tim?
Yeah, I interviewed him twice.
You did? Yeah. So yeah, and in fact, Sluggo. Yeah, Sluggo and I were at MCI West together. What an incredible Marine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Amazing Marine officer. Again, somebody that I would consider a mentor of mine. And I remember him guiding me along the process, because when he found out I had a 6-year gap, he had a 10-year gap. And Tim's background is unbelievable. And his experience in the Marine Corps, I think he had more fun as a reserve after active duty than he did when he was, an active duty pilot flying A6s. And his experience in Iraq were unbelievable, and what he did at the
Oh,
Warrior Battalion and Anglico, just remarkable what a guy like Tim Bladisell has done.
he's the reason I got demonetized. I mean,
Really?
I just stopped. I stopped even trying to monetize any videos at all because YouTube. I get so mad at those guys. If you
Fun.
say Iraq, Afghanistan, Marine Corps, war, or whatever their censors hit, they'll still run ads on your videos, but you don't
Mhm.
get paid, and because they say limited monetization. Well, it was after interviewing Sluggo. It was no hold bar. I mean, he
Yeah.
would say whatever he wanted. It was intense,
Yep.
and I'm like, anyway, screw those guys. But great guy. But you made me think about something else.
Yeah.
We're talking about getting out LinkedIn as a professional
Mhm.
to build your professional network. LinkedIn has great, think of it as the professional Facebook, but for professionals. And the Marine and as a military person, I think you get 1 year free premium LinkedIn where you can email Mitch Bell or Schuster
Mhm.
and say through LinkedIn you could send an email to them and help out. But that is a great way to help because what it may be is what is your civilian job right now?
So I'm a director of operations and maintenance programs for a government contracting company here in Colorado Springs. And I'm glad you brought it up because I don't have any social media. I got rid of all of it except LinkedIn. And as long as I continue to live and breathe and try to help in civilian capacity and transition, I'll keep that profile because I've connected with some incredible professionals on LinkedIn. You
Yeah.
absolutely have to have that. I don't know if transition assistance today talks about LinkedIn.
Yeah, they should because you've got to build your professional network because what happens with the premium on the LinkedIn, let's say I want to work for your company. I don't
Right.
know you from Adam,
Right.
but you and I are LinkedIn mates.
Hmm.
And let's say that you are the boss of that job that I'm looking for, or you happen to be in HR for that company. This person X emails me and says, "Hey, Taco, do you know Schuster, Mark Schuster over at this company? I'm looking to go work for them." Oh yeah, could you connect me? And then you get connected through that, and that may be the person who has the belly button, tickles the belly button for HR to say, "Hey, do me a favor, pull this resume out." That resume gets pulled out of thousands of resumes that
Hmm.
they have in the database in the well of applicants. Um, Networking is completely that's how I got hired at my airline. I was on recruiting duty. You and I were actually on recruiting duty at the same time. I was at Ninth Marine Corps District as a
Oh,
double
that's nice.
AOP,
Yep.
and I'm up at district. And my replacement, who was a 130 guy, Brad, he took the T-34 Bravo out to a local event that we have every year called NIFA, where
Hmm.
all these collegiate college students fly in. They do little test things with their airplanes and whatever performance evaluations. Well, American Airlines happened to be there giving mock interviews to these young college students, not for American, but for later when they go to Envoy or Eagle at the time.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting in a booth and I'm next door to this old grizzly 7.6 captain. I thought he was the oldest looking Eagle pilot I'd ever seen, flying little small jets. And I'm like, "So how long you been flying for Eagle?" And he goes, "Eagle? I fly for American Airlines. I'm a 767 captain." I'm like, "Yeah, but really? Why? What are you here for? These are college students. You're not hiring college students to be airline pilots." And he goes, "Oh no, we do mock interviews and da 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 da." "Hey, we got a Marine that's here. He's out giving a talk. Why don't you come to lunch with us?" And I did. This guy, Reb Stimson, had retired the year before in 97,
Hmm.
took my application. They opened the window up, American did, in November of 97 for 1 month. So
Really?
within 1 month time window, you had to get the application, fill it out, send it in to be in the pool. They got 25,000 applications in 30 days. And what he did was he took my application, walked it into the chief pilot who used to be his co-pilot and said, "Hey, I want you to give this guy a shot." That right there got my application on top of 25,000. I got hired in September of 98. The day I signed my DD 214 was the day I was hired.
Taco, that's
So
amazing.
it works out. Why do I, so many charity events and things that I do is because I came home, I was blessed. I came home from the war whole, very lucky. And if I can help out guys that didn't come home whole, I'm all about it. If I can help out and mentor somebody who is going through the process of trying to become a pilot, going from an enlisted mechanic on helicopters to being a pilot, I help them. Whatever we can do in our lives to pay it forward, that's my mission in life. And
yeah,
we all do that, but to do that, you have to make connections and you have to bridge those connections. It's very hard when you're on active duty and you have Uncle Sugar taking care of everything to what is best for my family in moving. Well, you can't jump a little creek with small steps. You got to take giant bounds and leaps of faith. And sometimes that leap of faith could be assisted by Shu going, hey, listen, you'll land on the other side of the bank, no problem. You're going to make it. And oh, by the way, as you go, you jump over there, grab that M16 on the bank, strap on the reserve pack, continue down marching the way you want to go on your your first Civ Div job, but take the Marine Corps with you or the Army or whatever. Take that military with you. I tell everybody who's getting out because they're all like 10 years active duty. I go, that's 10 years of active duty. 10 more years is going to go by in an absolute blink of an eye. And before you know it, you'd be retired. And
yeah. And so
yeah.
I want Marines to do something that I deal with when my wife and I are working with transitioning military on their financial situations. I want them to start learning a tool called Dreaming in HD. So let's say we got a young captain, right? And he or she is considering the change to the civilian world. They're starting to, because remember, they're starting families, they're going for their education, and they're trying to start a civilian career. When you think about 10 years from now, ask yourself, what would my life be like if I did it just in the civilian world? And what would my life be like if, as you say, I brought the Marine Corps with me? Now, whether you have 5 years in or 10 years in, you're going to live the next 10 to 15 years anyway. And let's encourage these Marines that are unbelievable men and women that have accomplished some of the most demanding tasks that anybody could ask of them, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They've been all over the world. And you're the most talented pool of potential employees that guys like you and me are looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do this. Mitchell Bell did it. Mark Shuster did it. My commanding general has been in the Marine Corps 38 years. He went to boot camp in 1984. That's the year I think you and Scott graduated high school.
High school, yeah.
He is still serving, and he's going off in 2 months. On 2 June, he takes over as the commanding general of Marine Forces Korea. And he's a reserve 2-star, and he got orders for 2 years. He's still leading from the front, right?
Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening to us, you absolutely can do this. And the reason I know you can do this is because Taco and Shu, we are just further down the path. We are looking back. We know where all of the pitfalls are. We know where the good exits are, the bad exits. We know where all the speed traps are. And we simply want to mentor you to make you realize you can do this, which is everything that my mentors did to me. They kept telling me, you can do this, you can do this. And so what we want you to do is we want you to find a unit, get into that unit. And here's the thing. It's going to look different. It's going to smell different. It's going to feel different. That's okay. It's not active duty. But what you have to realize is just because you're in a reserve command, you still have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to be a Marine, just like your inspector, instructor, staff. You are responsible every single day to be a Marine, just like you're on active duty. You just have to learn how to balance that with a civilian career. Because I'll tell you, Taco, easiest job I've ever had in my life was active duty Marine officer. Mm-hmm. Everything that people will stress about, money, finances, insurance, investments, and all that, It doesn't exist in the active duty Marine Corps. And you have all your Marines with you, whether you're a company commander, a battalion commander, a squadron commander, right? You make one comment, XO, form up the Marines. And all of a sudden you're standing in front of 1,000 Marines and you've got them there. Well, that doesn't happen in the reserve command. In the reserve command, you're going to have units spread out all across the organization, right? Maintenance company, CLB 453 is headquartered in Waco, Texas. You know, I was just there, right? Because we tried to connect when the timing. So I was just in Waco, Texas. Well, you know what? They have a unit in San Jose. How does a company commander have a unit 2,500 miles away? Or what is that? 1,800 miles away, maybe, San Jose to Waco? Yeah. Well, when you think about EABO and you think about the fight that may be coming in the Pacific, we're going to fight over the same dirt that our grandfathers took. And you know what the commandant's done? He has shrunk our forces down. And so what's happening is you're going to learn these incredible, they've shrunk our forces down to be able to fight in this expeditionary environment. And so when I'm talking with Marines across the MLG, I'm like, hey, what you do every day in the reserve command is exactly what's going to happen in a real fight in Indo-PACOM. You've got to get good at leading Marines that are 1,000 miles away from you. And that's a unique skill that you won't find in the active duty component necessarily. So you're going to learn these new skills in the reserves. So I want these Marines to know you can do this. Taco and Shu are here to help. You can find me on LinkedIn. Anybody that has questions about what life can be like, we will help them. So find a unit and start going there. Look, if you don't like it, you can drop.
Yeah,
if you're not happy,
I'm a quitter. I quit once.
Yeah,
I can quit again.
Exactly. But here's the other thing that happens in the reserve too. Another challenge that they have, Taco, is they're also maybe at the point where these commissioned officers, they want to get their master's degree or they want to get a higher education degree. So you come off of active duty and you drop into the IRR for 2 years. Go get your master's degree. Then you come back into the SMCR and you start going forward. Well, what happens on a promotion board, Colonel Shuster? It's very simple. You write a letter to the promotion board when you're going from captain to major, because you still get promoted in the IRR, and you simply tell them, hey, I took 2 years off after transitioning from active duty to reserve. I went and got my master's from Stanford University, and I started my career at whatever company, and I went right back into the SMCR, and I'm leading Marines. That is perfectly acceptable. We understand those processes. So what are we telling people? Network. Network in the Marine Corps Reserve is critical. We will help you come from active duty into the reserve command. Make sense? And then you got your career management teams will guide you along your career. But I also want to give you kudos, because let's talk about that network. I'm going to give you 2 examples of how it works in the Marine Corps Reserve. I was down in Marietta. I was on active duty for about 4 weeks. I'm sitting in my office and I get a call from a friend of mine. And at the time, she was a very senior leader with hiring for heroes. She calls me up and she's like, hey, Shu, I got a resume of this Marine officer in front of me. Do you think you'll know him? I'm like, okay, Lindsay, the Marine Corps has got, 300,000 Marines between reserve and active duty. Probably not, but go ahead and tell me, are you looking to hire this person? And she goes, yep. And so she gives me the person's name. And I said, hire him right now. Don't waste a second. You need to hire this person. And she's like, oh my God, you know this guy? I go, yeah. Technically, he worked for me when I was at SOI. He was so good at his job that when I left, they kept him on active duty orders. And he wound up being the first mobilized Marine major who was given command of the combat instructor school at SOI.
Wow.
How's that happen? And this man, Major Tim DeKreiger, is a superhero. And so what Lindsay told me was, well, we were going to hire him a year ago, but we picked this other guy, and this other guy's been a football bat. We had to fire him. We should have hired Tim. I go, well, I wasn't part of that, but I'm telling you right now, hire this person. So how does that happen? Tim has now been with Hiring Our Heroes. He's out in the Atlanta area, and he has changed so many lives. And he was prior enlisted active duty Marine infantryman. In fact, we were walking the same dirt in Somalia. We didn't know it at the time, right? He's got multiple combat tours in Iraq, a man of tremendous character, leadership, experience, and he wound up retiring as a Marine major. He's one of my mentors, I believe. He kept me out of trouble at SOI. There's a network situation for you. Marine Corps Reserve environment connected to the civilian side. And then you, Taco, you need some praise, brother. Remember, I called you in this new relationship I had a Marine sergeant with me at CLR 45, Citadel grad. All he wanted to be was an airline pilot. The Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force all turned him down to be a pilot. And I called you a few months ago, found out that Sergeant Yee, Marine Corps, is Warrant Officer Yee. He's going to be a Black Hawk pilot here this summer. And I connected you with him, and you're trying to help him, guide him from the rotary world into American Airlines. Man, you did that without question. I barely had known you. I just started getting to know you, and I could call you up because of our Marine Corps connection and say, can you help this Marine out? And that's the power of the network. That's what's really important to get across to our Marines that are curious about how they're going to manage the civilian world and the active reserve world. So I hope that resonates with everybody.
Yeah, it's plenty of opportunities out there, right? And that's my LinkedIn says connecting people. So we all need to do that. And if you do one or two, you have changed the trajectory of their lives and you've helped them out. And that's what we're all about. We're the largest, smallest gun club in the world, and networking. When I married my wife, and she's like, why are all these people honking at me? What do you mean? They honk at me and give me a salute.
Why?
I go, well, what do you think? She goes, I don't know. I said, because you got that Marine Corps sticker on the back of the car.
That's right.
And I said, did you notice? Did they have a Marine Corps sticker on their car? She goes, yeah, they did, as a matter of fact. I go, Marines do that. She goes, oh. I go, you don't see Army of One stickers on the back of their car. You don't see Navy. You don't see Air Force, really. You see Marine Corps stickers.
Yeah. I think the idea is that, when we leave, we still have to serve. And what you do is, look, there are no former Marines. We got to continue to fight against that. You're just a Marine and you're serving in a different capacity. And so when you leave active duty, or you leave a reserve environment, or you finally hang up the uniform like I'm going to do in February, right? You still have to serve in another capacity. So I encourage, get involved with your local Marine Corps League, get involved with your VFW, get involved with your DAV. I'm a life member of all of them. When I was out of the Marine Corps and we were down at the Marine Corps League, it's now called the President Ronald Reagan Marine Corps League Detachment in Ventura. Man, from 2003 to 2009, we were leading the largest Marine Corps balls in Marine Corps League history. At one point in 2000, I think it was 2004 or 5, we had almost 600 people at a Marine Corps ball at the Ronald Reagan Library right underneath Air Force One. And we were raising $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year and sending that money to the Wounded Warrior Regiment at the height of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was not in the Marine Corps, but we found ways to serve. And if you're leaving active duty to transition to a civilian career, God bless you for what you've done. I know your future is going to be phenomenal, but serving in the Marine Corps Reserve component is another great way to serve. And it'll keep you connected because you're going to need that. I think getting out of the Marine Corps, Taco, was harder for me than getting in the Marine Corps. And it was pretty hard for me to get in. Yeah. Getting out of the Marine Corps was very difficult for me, and I struggled with it. I'm more than prepared to do it now. In fact, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to retire and find a new chapter in my life because I'm also pretty broken at almost 54. I'm not as old as you and Scott, right? I'm not as banged up as you guys. But you'll know when it's time to hang it up. Yeah. But I continue to serve in other capacities at the veteran centers out here, the Marine Corps leagues. And that's important to know that you're not doing this alone. Yes, it's scary. It's fearful. But you know what? OCS was fearful. You got it done. TBS could have been fearful. You got it done. Flight school, I'm sure it was an overwhelming task for you. MOS schools, the first time you stood in front of your first platoon and you're in charge, or you have all these other responsibilities. Everything you've done in your life as a Marine officer or Marine staff NCO has prepared you to kill it in the civilian world. And guess what? You can also bring the Marine Corps with you. It's very doable. And I'd encourage everybody to look into doing that. Give it a shot.
Do you remember when we were on recruiting duty, they used to make these books about famous Marines famous people who served in the Marine Corps. And you'd look through it and you're like, Johnny Cochran. Wow, I didn't know that lawyer was a Marine. Wow, and you're going.
Remember the video?
Mm-mm.
So every time kids would sit down, and I've still got a copy of it. I'll need to send you a copy. In fact, it's losing my brain, but it was a 3.5-minute video set to music. And can I give you a funny story about that? So I'm the XO of RS Springfield. And of course, we're responsible for Connecticut, the entire state of Rhode Island, Worcester County West, Fall River, Massachusetts, which tucks underneath Boston. And then we had a portion of Vermont and New Hampshire. Well, there was a long-term serving senator in Rhode Island named Senator Chaffee. He had been a platoon commander in World War II, and he was a company commander in Korea. One of the most prestigious Marines that has ever served in the U.S. Senate. I get a call one day from Brown University, pretty liberal school, right? Mm-hmm. And this person calls up from Senator Chaffee's office and says, "Hey, Captain Shuster, we are having our annual meet and greet congressmen and senators because young men and women were applying to the academies." And she said, every year, Senator Chaffee puts on a presentation at Brown University, and he welcomes parents and kids to come in and to meet service members. Well, all of the service academies have a representative, but Senator Chaffee always wants a Marine officer there because of his background. And I said, "Ma'am, I'm very familiar with his background." Mm-hmm. My first year, I go out to Brown University. I think this is a great story. And she says, "Look, when you show up, Colonel Shuster, there's going to be an Army rep, a Navy rep, a Coast Guard, everybody from the service academies." She said, "You're going to get a chance to speak, and the senator wants you to go last because there's no service academy. But please understand, you can't bring, there's no videos, none of that, but you can bring some of your recruiters and some materials." I said, "No problem. I won't bring any videos." Well, I got this video, famous former Marines, that we play every kid that comes into the offices. So I bring it with me. What am I going to do? I show up in my dress blue Alphas, young stud-looking captain, at least I think, right? Better looking than I am now. And I get there about an hour and a half early because I'm looking for this lady. And so I go up to her and I said, "Ma'am, I want you to understand, I know I'm violating your rules, but I have this 3.5-minute video." And she goes, "Captain, I told you." I said, "Ma'am, hold on. The senator's in the video." And she's like, "Really?" I said, "Let me go last. Let me show you the video." So she plays it. She goes, "Oh, okay. All right. Freaking Marine captains. All right, you win. So let's do this. You're going to go very last." I said, "Perfect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get up and I'm just simply going to say, please play the video. You play the video. I'll talk for 5 seconds. I got this." She goes, "All right, but I lose my job, you're in trouble." I will stand at the end of the senator's, I'll report to him.
Yeah.
So this place fills up. It's Brown University. The auditorium is packed. And I'm sitting up on stage, and the senator gets up, welcomes everybody. He introduces the Army, and they're like, "All right, go to West Point, go to the Coast Guard Academy, go to the Air Force Academy," which, by the way, I can look outside my house. You'll see when you come here one day, right? It's right out my back window. And then the Navy guy gets up and is like, "Come to the Naval Academy." And so then Senator Chaffee gets up and he goes, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. But for those of you who don't know, I myself am a Marine officer, and it's important that I have the Marines here. And they don't have a service academy, but Captain Schuster is going to come up and talk to you anyway." So I get up, shake his hand.
Don't F it up.
Yeah. And I'm sweating down the back of my blues because I'm going to get my ass beat by this senator. And I'm certainly a boot to him. And I get up and I'm like, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. Senator Chaffee, thank you very much. Please roll the tape." And the lights go out. And the screen comes up, and I look back, and Senator Chaffee is literally barking in her ear. And I come over and I go, "Sir, I take full responsibility for this. You're in the video." And he goes, "Roll the tape." So I look back, and the Service Academy guys, they are pissed because they were told no videos. I'm just like, "Whatever, man. You got to ask.
You're not Service Academy."
Right. So we play this video, and I got to tell you, it's a badass video. We should play it one day on one of your shows. Maybe we'll play it. And the video is done. And I look at the senator, and he's like, so I go up to the podium and I say, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Captain Shuster with the United States Marine Corps. You may realize that there are no service academies for the Marine Corps. However, there are many ways to become a Marine officer. Some of you may realize that the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. That is a fact. But we are the men's department. And if you want to talk to me, I'll be outside when we're done." And I got off the podium. And when the Navy lieutenant looked at me, he was lieutenant commander, that son of a bitch wanted to kill me. Senator Chaffee was just beaming. By the time I got outside, there were people just hoarding around the Marine Corps table. They're like, nobody's talking to the Navy. It was
Yep.
wicked. And then Senator Chafee comes up to the table, and I said, hey, sir, I just want you to know I've got a copy for you. He goes, Captain, you did great, but I need you to call Headquarters Marine Corps because they mispronounced my name in the video. And he walked off. And then I got a call back the next year and did it again. It was awesome. So I don't know why I told you that story, but
no, that's a great
kind
story.
of a fun story. Yeah.
Recruiting, we could actually probably have an entire episode on recruiting stories from recruiting duty, because I've got a whole list that I've never opened that can of worms. But
I got to, to do that, I got to get my brother on. I wish I could get him to come on and talk about his last tour in Iraq when he was a CO of 3-4 in Al-Qaim for 10 months.
yeah,
What they accomplished is incredible. But his stories, because he was the RSCO at Albuquerque from 99 to 2003.
oh shit.
Yeah, 37 months. He made shipping and contracting for 37 straight months.
Wow.
They were, I think when he took over, they were like in the bottom eighth of, it's 48 RSs in the Marine Corps. They were like 38 or 39. And I think 3 years later when he left, I think they were in the top 10. Yeah.
It's all about the commanding officer. I mean, he sets the tone.
Yeah. Just good leadership. He told me some good stories that I could relate to, but I won't share those because they're not mine to share. They're his. But if you think if you think about a mentor of mine, I think my brother has been somebody that's been really important in my life, and I got to give him kudos. It's another silly story. When I got promoted to colonel in 2020, it was right here in my house because it was COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was September 9th, 2020. Taco, hadn't snowed that early in Colorado since 1969. I'd waited 23 years to make colonel, and we had like six inches of snow that day. It was pretty crazy. But my brother watched it via Zoom. I think I had like 80 people on Zoom because I've just been blessed with so many people in my life to help me get here. I got to tell you, man, I had a letter that he sent me when I was in OCS from first lieutenant to candidate Shuster. And I pulled that thing out and I read it during my promotion ceremony. I'm going to get emotional now. He is just an amazing individual. He's been an incredible person in my life. And he was absolutely one of the best Marine officers the Marine Corps ever had. And I wish he had gone further, but he always told me, he goes, Mark, I had a goal to be a battalion commander. I not only did that, I did it in combat. I am at peace. And when he retired in 2008, he was good. And he'd been very successful since then. So he's got amazing stories, both from combat, Marine Corps, being an instructor at TBS, but recruiting is one of those environments that if you've been on it like you and I were, and I was the XO of a station, it is a wickedly challenging environment. I think it's harder than being deployed. It's harder than a combat environment. But it's one of the most rewarding experiences to watch a young man and woman transition to Marine. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is difficult. One of the best staff sergeants I've ever seen kind of did the same thing. Walked in, looked around the auditorium.
At high school?
I bought a couple guys at high school, and he goes, I only see 4 of you that are even able to join the Marines that have what it takes, I think. Mm-hmm. You know who you are. Come up and see me afterwards. And he walked out. And that was it. Everybody's like, you must be talking about me. They went up, and they were all around. And then he's standing there, and he's like, yeah, if you can't get up on the bar and knock out 20 pull-ups on this little piece of crap bar that we probably spent $30 on.
Right.
If you can't knock out 20 pull-ups, go talk to the Army. I'm not going to waste my time. Oh my God. I mean, talk about in their face, but they love that. They didn't want to be coddled and whatever. Hey, you know what, Mark? We've been off for an hour and a half. I'm going to have to pop off, but I got to tell you, man, this has been a great hour and a half with you. We're going to have to do another one. I want your brother on. That's your mission there, sir, is get your friggin' brother on this thing. We'll have the 3 of us. All right.
Let's see if I can do that. I'll try to convince him. Maybe what we need to do is I'll just send him this link and be like, hey bro, this is a little unusual thing that I did. And it'd be great for you to tell your story for Marines out there, because I think it'd be fun to connect back with you, tell some of the stories from your TBS, man. I just thought of a really crazy story. Can I tell you one more story?
One more, go.
One more. It's Power Network. So I remember my brother telling me a story when he was at OCS, and that would have been in 1987. You probably went in 87 as well.
Well, I did juniors in 86 at Upshur, seniors in 87.
Okay. So he was in the White Elephants back then, the old buildings. Anyway, he
Uh-huh.
tells me the story. One morning, they get up, and this drill instructor comes up, and he's yelling at the platoon. And he's basically going, I don't know why. I don't know why this. I don't know why this. I don't know why this. And he goes, and I don't know why I'm talking to the wrong platoon. And he marches off. It's like before they're going to chow in the morning. So you can't see anything. It's really dark.
Right.
I'm like, that's funny. And Scott goes, the next morning, drill instructor comes up and he's yelling at his platoon. I don't know why. And I don't know why this. I don't know why that. And he goes, I don't know why I'm talking to the wrong platoon again. And he steps on. And, I'm thinking to myself, all right, I mean, my brother has a rule, never let the facts stand in the way of a good story. Okay, I like that. And I really didn't know that was a true story. Well, here's how small the Marine Corps is. Flash forward, March 6, 1992, and I check into 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines. I go down to the motor pool, and First Lieutenant Rowe is the outgoing motor T officer. And I've got about a 3-month turnover with him. And one day, a couple months into it, we're talking about life. And I happen to mention, I got a brother that's in the Marine Corps. He's an instructor at the basic school right now and is Capt. And he's like, Shuster, he goes, damn, is that your brother? And I go, yeah, it's my brother, Scott. He goes, yeah, I was in his platoon at OCS. I go, really? Okay, I got to ask you, did this really happen? And I tell him the story and he goes, absolutely true story. That really happened. I was there, the witness. So every once in a while, my brother uses actual facts instead of, a little embellishment. So anyway, I'm really proud of him, and I'll see what I can do to try to convince him to maybe come on and help the show. But Taco, thank you so much.
You bet.
I am so humbled by this. I am low on the totem pole when it comes to the amazing guests you've had on the show. But I really hope that we've given the right message to those Marines that want to transition. And if there's more stuff you want to talk about in the future, man, I'm more than happy to help out. And I look forward to doing more for you, because we got to continue to serve and help those that have gone after us to be successful. So thank you very much, brother.
Well, hang on for 1 second. I'm going to pull you off. I'll say goodbye, and then just hang on 1 second. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Taco.
I can't thank you enough for spending the day with me.
No problem. Take care.
See ya.
Semper Fi.
Hey, folks, listen, that was a lot of fun. Hour and a half with Shu. Listen, if you are or you know of somebody that's getting out of the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force, they have all the same programs as well. They really need to look into this stuff to stay active, stay participating, because that 10 years or 8 years that they spent, it means a lot. And before you know it, you'll be retired. I mean, I joined in 1986 and retired in 2015. Those years went by so fast. Now we are the old crowd, the old cadres. So go find yourself somebody you can help mentor. It's a great feeling, takes care of our future, keeps our nation protected. We need that. So until I see you guys again next week, adios, hasta luego, sa wiedersehen, tschüss, shishini, au revoir, domo arigato gozaimasu, tando shinde kudasai, ciao, arrivederci. I am going to pass on, and I'm going to go with this one.